Good morning, students, and welcome to the class of English. Today, your English teacher is in front of you with a new poem, that is The Tale of Melon City by Vikram Seth. Vikram Seth is an Indian author, and he used to basically write about contemporary India. And you'll find the details about Vikram Seth in my previous video, where I have explained the chapter in detail. In this video, children, I will explain you the summary of the chapter, that is The Tale of Melon City. So, you might be very enthusiastic that what kind of city it would be, that is a melon city. Children, the name of the city, when itself is very, full of happiness, that is melon, and full of enthusiasm, then you can imagine how humorous the story would be. So definitely stay with me in the video, and you will come to get some kind of happiness by reading this poem. Alright, so there's a lot of fun there also, children. So as you can see that Melon City, and what is actually Melon City? Melon is a kind of fruit which we use in our day-to-day life. Alright, but when we talk about Melon City, it may be anything which is some kind of fictionary place or some kind of fantasy place. Now, in this story, if you talk about the detail, there was a very just and placid king. Placid means children. You might have watched the Hollywood movie, that is the Lake Placid, where there were the attacks of some kind of crocodile or piranhas. So the term placid you can read here. So when you talk about Lake Placid, placid means calm and quiet. So here we are talking about the king who has been referred to as Placid King. Alright, so the king was placid, and it means calm and quiet. And children, there's a way to pronounce quiet, Q-U-I-E-T and Q-U-I-T-E. So how do you pronounce Q-U-I-T-E? It is quiet, and Q-U-I-E-T, it is quiet. And you know the difference. Quiet means silence, and quiet means when some remarkable effort we put or some remarkable quantity is there, then we use the word quiet. Alright, so the placid means calm and quiet. So we are talking about a king who was a gentle and just king, and who he ruled over a territory. And the king announced publicly that a curved structure should be built which should extend across the major public road in a victorious manner to benefit the beholders spiritually. So exactly, children, the king wanted that an arch should be constructed, and generally the arch and such kind of structures are constructed to celebrate the victory of any ruler over any place. So king was also a victorious king, so he wanted that an arch should be constructed to celebrate his victory, and the beholders or the spectators should get spiritually motivated by watching his victory symbol. So obeying the king's order, the workmen went there and built the arch. The king rode down the thoroughfare to enlighten the spectators. Since the arch was built too low, the king lost his crown under the arch. So the height of the arch was not particular, it was not exact. So due to which, when the king went there for inspection, exactly it happened that King's crown struck the arch and it fell down, and it was a problem. Now, when this happened, the eyebrows of the gentle king were knit in displeasure. The calm and placid king turned out to be very infuriated person. So he called it a disgrace and declared that the chief of builders would be hanged, because he only was responsible for the construction of the arch. So the hanging was to take place, and all the arrangements were being made by the responsible persons. The ropes and gallows were arranged, and the chief of builders was led out. As he passed the king, he shouted, "O king, it was a workman's fault." So the builder iterated that it is not his fault, it is a workman's fault. And as he passed, the king stopped the proceedings and ordered that all the workmen be hanged instead. The workmen looked surprised and said to the king that he had not realized that the bricks were made up of wrong size. So workmen said that no, it's not our fault. The bricks were of wrong side. So we should not be accused of doing the crime which we have not committed. So the king ordered that the masons be called there. Masons were brought there. They stood trembling with fear. They now blamed the architect. The architect was called. The king ordered the architect was to be hanged. The architect reminded that the king he had made certain improvements in the plan, and when he showed them to the king, on hearing this, the king became very angry and was unable to act calmly. So when the blame was passed on to architect, he was also quite cunning and clever also. He passed the blame to king, and what he said, he asserted that, sir, when I made the plan, you just amended the plan, and due to the amendment, the plan was not mine then. So how can you say that I am the accused one? Now, being a just and gentle king, he observed it was a very difficult business and he needed some advice. So the king ordered the wisest man in the country to be brought forward. So the wisest man was found and brought to the royal court. He was so old that he could not walk or see. Children, here comes the humor and the wit in the story. The wisest man was declared the person who was the oldest one. See, how is it possible that the oldest one would be the wise one? It's not the real thing, but these things the poet has included to create the humor, to create the fun. Alright, so the oldest man was brought as the wisest one, and he was actually not brought, he was dragged to the royal court. He was so old that he could not walk or see. So he had to be carried there. He said in a trembling voice that the culprit must be punished. It was the arch that had hit the crown off, so it must be hanged. Then the arch was taken to the scaffold. Then the councillor observed how they could hang something that had touched the head of the king. So arch was taken to the scaffold. Then a councillor observed how they could hang something that had touched the head of the king. The king thought carefully and said it was true. However, by now the crowd became restless. So when the crime passed on to the arch, that yes, arch has committed the crime. See how a non-living thing can commit a crime, but see the malignity. The arch was declared as the accused one, and arch was being taken for the hanging. Now, when it could not happen, the king thought carefully. Until then, the crowd had become restless and it was muttering loudly. The king noticed their mood and trembled. He asked the people who had assembled there to postpone deliberations over finer points like guilt. Since the nation wants a hanging, someone must be hanged, and that too immediately. So the king again wanted a little bit tricky. He said that, okay, the nation wants hanging, Just leave the point that someone had committed crime or not. See, again, a fine thread of humor here. What is it? That the king noticed the mood and he asked the people who had assembled there to postpone the final points like guilt. Now, hanging was to be done just for the sake of hanging, but not just because of guilt. So, the nation wants the hanging, and someone has to be hanged, and that too immediately. So, the noose was set somewhat high. Each one was better by and by. Only one man was tall enough to fit it. And who was the tall man? The king himself. So he was hanged by the royal ordinance. The ministers felt satisfied that they had found someone to be hanged. Otherwise, the unruly town might have rebelled against the king. They shouted, "Long live the king!" Since the king was dead, the practical minded ministers sent messengers to declare in the name of His Majesty that the next to pass the city gate would choose the ruler of the state. So now the king was dead, and no problem was there. The practical minded ministers sent messengers that in the name of the king, let's decide our new ruler of the state. So, what was the message? That is, the next to pass the city gate would choose the next ruler of the state. So then the next to pass the city gate was an idiot. See, children, again the humor is here. So he was an idiot, and he was asked by the guards that who is to be the king? The idiot replied, Melon. Actually, it all happened just because the idiot liked Melon, so he gave the standard answer to all questions. If you ask his name, he would say Melon. If you ask where do you live, he will say Melon. So it was the standard answer of that person. The ministers crowned a Melon as their king, and then they led the Melon to the throne and set it down there with the proper respect. When asked how their king happens to be a Melon, the people would reply that it was on account of customary choice. If the king felt happy in being a Melon, it was all right for them. So now the people were so, what to say, of different kind, different mindset of that. They said that if our king wants to be a Melon, actually they gave reasoning, or they gave reason to what they did. So they said that if our king wants to be a Melon, then we have no problem in accepting Melon as our king. What we all want is peace and liberty, and that king should not interfere in between our businesses. That's all about this poem, children, and just go through my previous video and you will find the detailed explanation along with the description about the poet Vikram Seth, and you would come to know much more about Vikram Seth from there. Alright, children, so now let's discuss some question answers here. What impression would you form of a state where the king was just and placid? So the state where the king was just and placid seems to be a backward region full of ignorant fools and ruled by a whimsical king. Whimsical actually, children, means funny. So the king considers himself to be the custodian of people and gets an arch erected for their spiritual upliftment. The king's word is a command and unwritten law. The whole process of changing judgment on the appeals of the victims appears as a mock trial. The ministers and the councillors seem to be selfish. They advise the king to serve their own ends, though they appear to flatter the king and seem dedicated to the state. So the place is actually, crowded by flatterers. All the persons who do flattery there, they just inhabit that place. Alright. So the ministers and councillors seem to be selfish. All are selfish over there, including the king. The common people are educated and ignorant fools, and they need mental as well as spiritual upliftment. They are fun loving, and in their quest for fun, they can cross all limits. And if deprived of fun, the unruly mob can rebel against the crown. They do not bother whether the king is a man or a melon. They want that their personal freedom, their free business, and peaceful lives should not get disturbed. Next question, children, and how according to you can peace and liberty be maintained in a state? So various people advocate various means of maintaining peace and liberty in a state. So some are in favor of dictatorship and some are in favor of democracy. Children, we could have a different opinion about these two things. That is, first is dictatorship. Talking about dictatorship, dictator you can know about Hitler, children, and Mussolini. Mussolini belonged to Italy. All right. So democracy, as it is our country, India. So some favor dictatorship and some favor democracy. I think the best course lies in the good governance, whether it is dictatorship and or whether it is democracy. You might have heard about China. What kind of country is China? It is a communist country. We do have a one-party system there. The people there just don't select their leaders as we do in India. We have different party system there, multi-party system, but in China they do have only one party, that is Communist Party. And you have to select from them only, the same party. So both ways can be good, but it all depends upon the choice. But democracy actually plays a good role in shaping the liberty of the citizens. So I think the best course lies in good governance, whatever is well administered and is most fruitful for the citizens as well as the rulers. It ensures peace and liberty to the common man. A strong state in itself is safe against any external threat. So the state should be safe. Dedicated rulers, enlightened citizens, and proper law enforcing agencies can establish peace and harmony in the state. Narrow considerations based on religions, caste, etc. should be discouraged because these are potent threat to the internal security as they fuel dissensions among the people. Free expression of opinions must be allowed, but respect for law and order be observed. People should be conscious of their privileges and rights as well as duties and responsibilities. Here comes the children, the very important point. Alright? And that is duties and responsibilities. Actually, we in fact demand duties. Alright? We demand rights, all right, but we forget about our duties and responsibilities. So for maintaining the peace and liberty, rights as well as duties must be followed. Suggest a few instances in the poem which highlight the humor and irony. The tale of Melon City is full of instances of humor and irony. The just and placid king got an arch built to edify spectators. The king's riding under low arch and losing his crown also creates humor. The way the accused appeal to the king and shift the blame on others is quite funny. The unstable behavior of the king also creates humor. The self-defense of the architect is a masterpiece. He holds the king himself responsible for the disgrace as he had made certain amendments to his original plan. The king's anger and inability to act calmly create humor. The criteria for selection of the wisest man is quite ironic because they selected they consider the old man as the wisest one. It is assumed that wisdom comes with age. Being blind, he does not know that an arch cannot be hanged. Others have eyes, yet they follow the advice and take the arch to the gallows. How ironic it is. The king wants to keep the crowd in good humor and orders that someone be hanged. Only the king is tall enough to fit the news. What an irony. Irony, children, we also know by the name satire. So irony also we can say it is satire. So it is ironical also that the king is hanged by his own order, and the custom of naming the next king seems equally ridiculous. The idiot who passes by the city gate suggests Melon to be the next king, and people who think only of their own interests do not bother whether the king is a man or a melon, and this is at once humorous and ironic. So children, that's all in this video, and hope you would get benefited with it. So thank you for today, and Till my next video, goodbye.